So, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name's John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series, we talk about all things cloud with experts and advocates across the industry, covering a vast array of topics from skills and careers through to technical how-to and personal thoughts and opinions. So whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. Really is appreciated. Please do take part in the chat. Drop us a comment, like and subscribe. That's always hugely appreciated. Okay, so my next guest is a senior cloud advocate lead working at Microsoft, based out of Toronto, Canada. He's super inspirational and is doing some amazing work with the global tech teams. And he's given up some time today to talk to me around an area that's always super fun, interesting and inspiring to me on a daily basis. So I'm super excited and honoured to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With as Mr. Anthony Bartolo. Hey, Anthony, how you doing?
About yourself, John?
Yeah, no, doing really well. And thanks. Do you know, it's been such a long time that I had to do an introduction like that. Thanks for being so patient there, Anthony. How many times do I want to do a take? We got there.
No, awesome. Awesome intro. It was really cool.
No, not at all. I mean, firstly, thanks so much for giving up your time and coming on and doing an episode with me. You know, you're one of those guys across the industry that I've been looking at what you've been up to and obviously what you've been putting out to the community and helping the community over the last sort of 18 months. And it's always been super exciting, super interesting. So I'm really stoked that you've given up your time to come and say hello to me for half an hour or so. So, look, for those that don't know you, I mean, do you want to give yourself a little bit of an intro, Anthony, and let people know what you're up to?
So, Anthony Bartolo, Senior Cloud Advocate, lead with Microsoft. I was formerly under Rick Claus on the IT Pro team and have recently moved over to what we're calling next generation or student-focused experiences in terms of advocating to and listening from in adoption of technology. Obviously, you know, Azure focused, but we do talk about other technologies and other implementations that are put forth. For me, it's all about the experimentation, and what's exciting is, you know, bringing in the architectural aspect, the IT pro aspect into a realm where, you know, these students, they don't see delineation between IT pro and dev. You just see the opportunities or problems that need to be addressed, and you just bring all aspects of technology in to come and address those things. And so it's very much a great learning experience for me to listen into these students and see where their passions lie, and, you know, bring my knowledge from an architectural standpoint and some dev into the fold to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve.
No, that's cool. And, you know, I know just before we start this recording, you mentioned to me, because I know you from being part of that IT Pro community, that IT Pro advocacy team that, you know, are doing fantastic work. But equally, it's cool to see that you've kind of moved into this slightly different angle now of the world. And I guess, you know, you just explained that to me then, where you're looking to learn and understand where students and the young people coming out of college and university or coming into the industry, I guess, explore their ideas and their passions and how they see the world. I mean, is that the kind of angle that you're working with at the minute, Anthony? And you know, how did that come to be?
Well, and that's just it, right? It's not even the angle. It's what's actually being represented from these students. The students don't see, you know, you are an IT pro, you are a developer. What they see is you are a technologist. I know a lot of people cringe when they hear that terminology, but it's come to a point where, you know, a lot of people look at all the technology that's out there and they get all enamored by, oh my God, you can do virtual reality, you can include artificial intelligence, you can do automation with IoT. They try to build solutions around technologies as opposed to what is the opportunity in front of us? What are we trying to accomplish? And, you know, from the student perspective, the way they look at it is, here's the opportunity or problem that I need to address. I'll understand what I have to understand about that problem or opportunity, and then I'll include the technology as a resource, as a tool to address that opportunity or problem, as opposed to focusing on that technology and building around that. And in those types of scenarios, you see these individuals wear, you know, numerous amount of hats, everything from building out the architecture and the infrastructure to support data streams, to support security, identity management, and then from the development standpoint, using a plethora of development tools, from Visual Studio Code to using languages like Python, Node.js, you name it, whatever they feel comfortable with, to address these opportunities. And of late, I've had a lot of opportunities to participate in hackathons with these students, and just to see how creativity comes first is so awesome. They're very willing to learn on the fly and build out on the fly. And I'm so excited to see that enthusiasm and that passion for enablement through those types of opportunities coming into the workforce.
Yeah, and it's been, I suppose, it's been one of those things that has probably hit the industry in quite a profound way. Certainly over the last 5 or 6 years. I remember back in, I think it was Ignite 2016, when Satya came out and said, that this phrase of empowering everybody to, across the planet to achieve more. And I think I mentioned this on one of the videos. I remember thinking at the time, is that just another one of those, typical corporate buzz taglines? And it's only now, 4 or 5 years later, that you look back and you go, wow, he wasn't far wrong with what it was going. And, I think he coined the phrase that tech intensity at the time as well, which was, little did I know, as I use the inverted commas, a seasoned IT pro, I guess. I've been working in it for a length of time. You kind of get used to kind of working in a certain way and knowing that you need to learn new things on a fairly regular cadence, but certainly not like it is today, or certainly not like it has been for the last few years now. I mean, it was interesting that you mentioned that, working with, youngsters coming into the industry now, that the enthusiasm to just pick up and learn things on the fly. Do you think that's the way the industry is going to go? Does it have to go that way? What's your take on that, Anthony?
Well, let's look at it from a historical perspective in terms of where we've come from, right? I too come from an IT background, started my certifications on Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 2. I was the front end individual that was connecting devices via ActiveSync, and that's why Service Pack 2 was so important to me. My career at Microsoft was Windows Mobile and then became Windows Phone, right? And today, unfortunately, that OS no longer exists anymore, although we still hear the interface was phenomenal and people miss that. Back then, we were very much fixated on points of time, points of services. It was a server software, it was a hardware piece, it wasn't a combination of everything. It wasn't a driving for the opportunity. Email on your hip, that was a big deal. And then the internet happened, and then the iPhone happened, and then you have all this technology around us in terms of the enablement and flow of information. And that presented new opportunities, and that presented new problems, right? We came into identity security pieces, security of data that's on public accessible networks. It's, the amount of functionality and capability grew, but so did the opportunities and problems grew as well in terms of everything that's going on. I think the most telling in terms of the change and transformation that we've gone through has been this pandemic, right? In the way that we do work, in the way that we see what work actually is now, and how we're accomplishing the tasks that we need to do for our day-to-day lives, for both personal and business. And what's been interesting is those that are most prepared that I've seen have been the students, because they're so open in terms of the way the technology is actually being adopted, but it's not their focus. A lot of organizations that I've talked to, when they're looking at, what's their next step in terms of the evolution of the business that they offer, it is that, I'm going to, incorporate AI. And when I incorporate AI into my business, it's either going to make my business more money or it's going to save my business money, right? And it's like, okay, so that's great. You're going to incorporate AI. What are you going to accomplish? Well, I don't know. I'm just going to rub AI on my company. And it's going to be awesome, right? And then, it's interesting because it's the perception that AI is the future. But what does that actually mean, right? And it's, there's data that needs to be gathered. There's policies that have to be set in place in terms of who can gain access to that data, what the outcomes are going to be, the aspect of ethical AI. So ensuring that there's no bias in terms of what the AI is taught to provide in amidst those algorithms to provide an output. Make sure that it's fair use of the data that can be used, and it's used in an ethical way, right? A lot of conversations around facial recognition in terms of its ethical use, and can it be used in public areas, and there's a lot of things that has to be taken into consideration. And so when you talk about this with organizations, they go, whoa, I just want to incorporate AI. Why is this this big conversation now? Literally, from the student perspective, they don't see it that way. They see it from the perspective of, here's the opportunity that I have in front of me, right? whatever that may be, and they understand the opportunity, completely. They break it on down. They go through the opportunity or problem, and then look out into the technology and say, okay, what can we add with this? At a recent hackathon that I was just in, Hack to North, which is Canada's largest hackathon. I think there was 3,000 people participating in this hackathon, and it was all over. Like it was centered in Waterloo, Ontario, which is about 45 minutes northwest of where I live. But it was all across Canada was participating, and what was awesome was the team that won for the Microsoft prize was comprised of four business students that have never coded before in their life. And they devised a solution. They actually had a working demo of a solution that would enable homeless people to gain access to food via restaurants prior to the restaurants disposing of food that wasn't being used or before it expires, so that they can get access to it via a QR code system via mobile devices at these restaurants. And so the restaurant can put out their inventory in terms of what they have left, and then those that are displaced, they have access on their phone to know the restaurants around them have this type of food that's available, and literally accept the food on their phone, and then they go pick it up and do authentication that they are who they say they are via the QR code. 4 students, 2 in Toronto, 2 in Calgary. So for those don't know Canadian geography, Calgary is about a 3-hour flight from Toronto, so it's not really that close. Working collaboratively on a solution, none of the 4 of which are developers. So the entire solution itself was built on Power Platform, which was another awesome feat, right? And they incorporated, the Azure mapping services, the GIS services for localization of, if I'm here, what are the restaurants around me? And they won the prize. And the reason why is because they understood the opportunity and the problem that was in front of them. They knew the amount of homeless that were in Toronto. They knew the amount of food waste that's occurring. We connected them with organizations like Second Harvest, which is a phenomenal resource here in Toronto, that goes out and actually captures this food from these restaurants and from grocers before they dispose of it. So it's not expired yet, but it's prior to it being expired. So the food can be used by food banks and soup kitchens prior to it going to waste. And so it was awesome to see these 4 business students in 2 different provinces come together, none of them knowing how to code, building the solution on Power Platform, and then having this, it's viable. Here's the mobile app, presented it to organizations like Second Harvest. And I'm very excited to see where this goes forward from that. But it's that not being limited by the technology, not being fearful. I don't know JavaScript. I don't know Python. I don't know Node.js. I don't know how to use Visual Studio Code. In 72 hours, these students had a viable proof of concept that they were able to demo on stage and highlight to everybody in terms of the power and capability of this. And I can't wait to see what they do next with this. But it's that which is the future. It's not being, oh, I have to know this technology, or I have to, you're going to learn about the technology. It's the opportunity that's in front of you that you're going to really push yourself to understand what technology can adhere to that opportunity.
I guess what I'm hearing there, Anthony, is obviously that requirements, understanding of exactly what the problem is, and I think you hear it an awful lot over, again, certainly over the last few years. You hear a lot about AI, IoT, and how it's helping solve so many different humanitarian health needs across the globe in various different ways, and that's just another example of such. When you break things down, it's generally the simple ideas that are so powerful when you move and you use that technology, like you say. And I think for me, that's been one of the big eye-openers over the last few years was, things like you mentioned the Power Platform there to develop these kinds of solutions. Lots of people probably don't even know what the Power Platform is, let alone how they get involved with it. But just having that inquisitive mind, I guess that's probably fair to say. You kind of need to ask the important questions and have that spark of an idea of how can technology help you solve a problem. And I've always kind of half joked, but that's the most difficult part, in my view. That is the most difficult part, is understanding what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and then solve it in some kind of an elegant way using technology. But I mean, that's fantastic to hear, Anthony, and you're involved in those hackathons, quite regularly, I see. I mean, what else was it for you? How did you get in? What other things have you been involved with over the last few years, Anthony?
So, interestingly enough, my first foray into the hackathons was an internal one that we had at Microsoft. And it was something where our team, you know, we tried an experiment in terms of let's try a hackathon. We've never done one before. We gave ourselves 48 hours to
Hmm.
come up with a solution. And this is a global hackathon that occurred amidst the team that I was in at the time. We gave ourselves 48 hours. We all broke into groups of 5 and 6, and we went forth and see what we could build in 48 hours. And it was awesome because there was a plethora of resources that were available to us. You know, everything from IoT boards to Azure services that we can gain access to. But a lot of people were scratching their heads in terms of, well, what are we going to address and what are we going to do? And our team came up with this crazy idea of the whole aspect of pest control and especially in certain areas in metropolises, big cities like Toronto, New York, Seattle, they have issues with mice and rats and what have you. And we did a little bit of digging, and that was I would say the first 4 hours in terms of the hackathon when we were putting this together. We wanted to see, well, what is the opportunity here? What is something that we can look into in terms of this in this whole idea? And I remember there was a bunch of us working on this project. There was 5 of us working on the project, and we came to the conclusion that there's a huge opportunity in terms of if we were to build a solution that was more proactive in terms of the not only the capture of mice but also the cleaning out of the vermin once they've been captured, and to understand what that means when you put these traps out. How many mice are we actually catching? It was something where we all got excited, we all lit up, and we went out. We resourced a bunch of Raspberry Pis, and so here's my unit here. Raspberry Pis, and we literally connected them to your local retailer's mousetraps. So these are
Right.
$2 mousetraps. You can see probably the aluminum foil on there.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we used as the conductor. And so when the mouse was caught and the trap would go down, that would in essence complete the circuit, and it would tell us, hey, this trap is full. So we did this to 100 mouse traps, and we spread them all around in a warehouse as a test. And it was interesting just to see, there would be a little light that would light up when it caught a mouse, and that would push back into IoT Hub and push out the Power BI and show us on a diagram in terms of the building where all the mouse traps were. These were all where we were catching all the mice. So the first part was, hey, we were getting instantly notified when a trap was set off and caught a mouse.
Mm.
And then the next step from there was, well, what's next? Well, okay, so we want to make sure we can catch the most mice. So we want to make sure we know what are the best places to put the mouse traps inside of this room. And to do that, we started building on additional sensors into the rudimentary solution. We were capturing temperature because mice like it a little bit warmer than colder. So if it's in a warmer spot inside of that room, you're going to catch more mice. Darker areas catch more mice. Proximities to food. So if it's near a waste basket or if it's near a kitchen, that proximity too, it makes a big difference, right? All these indicators, all these sensors, we even got as sophisticated as triangulation with the Wi-Fi hotspots to know positioning inside of the room, so it actually would position via grid where these traps were. And we were feeding all this information through from IoT Hub to Service Fabric into the machine learning workbench to discover the patterns in terms of how many mice we were catching in specific areas. And it got so good that it would actually tell us this is where you should place the traps inside of the grid so that you can catch the most mice. And this was over a span of 48 hours that we built this out. We didn't sleep for 48 hours. It was complete go, 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 go. But it started off with just the automation piece of the mousetrap based on the opportunity and grew to a machine learning exercise based on the amount of data that we were capturing from this whole instance. Now, facilities in Redmond actually picked up our solution. And they actually implemented a version of this with a partner. I don't have the partner's name, but they actually built out a full-on industrial version because you're not going to put these little wooden mousetraps in facilities, right? And so it helped them be more proactive and be, where do we put these mousetraps to catch the most mice as opposed to having these eyesores that are all over the place when you have an issue. What's better still is that this solution we've enabled it as open source, and we've seen this this platform and this solution be used for a plethora of ideas, not just mousetraps or to catch vermin. It came to a scenario where We know of a newspaper chain in the US. We still have those newspaper boxes sometimes on the street corner. You go and you put your quarters in and you get your newspaper. So
Hmm.
instead of the mousetrap, they've actually put a scale, and it weighs, how many newspapers inside the box. And it actually could predict when all the newspapers are going to be sold, so that the person that fills the inventory will be more proactive in filling out the inventory.
Hmm.
Here in Toronto, a local ice cream shop that has the ice cream trucks that drive around in the summer, their trigger, instead of the weight scale or the mousetrap, is the music that's played when they drive around the neighborhoods to sell ice cream. When the music stops, that's the trigger to say, hey, in this area, now I've stopped for this amount of period of time, and I know, and it's this during this time of the day, I know that this spot is the best spot to come back to sell the most ice cream. And so
Okay.
they're still using the mousetrap solution. They've used it as an open source scenario to fulfill their opportunities or address their problems, which I love to see how this evolution of this continues to grow.
And that's the mind-blowing thing, I think, isn't it, Anthony? Is that certainly when you start off with the seed of an idea and you're working towards something, who would have thought that, people would have adapted what you put out there as open source into those other kinds of solutions. I'm pretty sure they weren't at the forefront of your mind as you're there, getting some, great visual data across a Power BI dashboard about mousetraps. When would you have even put that? And I think that for me, that is the seed of working with IoT, isn't it? It's really having that creative spark and being able to kind of move forward and understand those technology areas. I mean, what do you feel are the have you got any hints and tips or just general observations of what makes a great person to have on a team like a hackathon to come up with some of those Imagineering type innovation pieces? Is there a certain type of person or certain type of people? Has anything like that ever struck you, Anthony?
So yeah, definitely, it's a combination, right? It's not one individual.
Hmm.
The biggest thing that we had in terms of our team and success was there was a combination of IT professionals and developers on this team. There was some business understanding in terms of what's important, what should we focus on. Think like business PM type of scenario. It's not just a singular individual, right? And this is the thing, and this is something, from an IT pro perspective. A lot of times we're used to, hey, we need you to save money, and we need you to cut down on services and systems and go forth and do it. And as IT pros, from my generation, it was like, okay, I go back to my server room and I go and
Mm.
scratch my head and say, okay, if I cut this and I do this, but I don't ask anybody. I just
Yeah.
went and did it, right? Because I was
Yeah.
told, hey, you got to save 10% off your budget, right? Communication is huge, right? Understanding the opportunity is huge. And, it's something that IT pros are starting to do more and more, especially with the adoption of cloud. It's that conversational piece. How do we have the conversation with the business decision maker and the developer to have that holistic view of why are we doing a cost savings? What is the purpose of this cost savings?
Yeah.
What did you want to accomplish at the end of the day? Traditionally, we as IT professionals never asked those questions. We were just, we were very reactive. The business tells us this, we go and do it, right? What's been inspiring is that the students ask the question why.
Hmm.
So when we say, hey, go and solve this opportunity, why do we need to solve it? Why is it important? We should start it with why. It's a very big thing, that it allows us as IT professionals to stop being reactive and to be more proactive and to be part of the conversation. You know, I've been in that role where you're an IT pro and you're told I need you to do this, I need you to do that. So much so that I've even experienced, hey, the toilet in bathroom 3B is broken. Call IT because they're the ones to fix it because they fix everything, right? And
Hmm.
it doesn't help you, right? And a lot of IT shops see themselves as the cost center because that's what the organization has told them. You don't make money for me. You're a cost center. You're at a needed cost and make sure that everything keeps running. But a lot of IT professionals want to be that reason that the company moves forward. It's that investment. Well, I invested in IT to move us forward to make that adoption. That doesn't happen without communication. And so, from the hackathon perspective, communication was key. Different flavors of ideas and different flavors of experience was also key. When it came down to the technology, it was simple because it was, we're going to do Python for the mousetraps, and we're going to do Node.js for the ingestion of the data. We're going to use Service Fabric to split out all the data for us to go into the machine learning workbench. Like at that point, since we knew what we were trying to accomplish, and we had the communication and agreement of the team, what we wanted to do, the technology piece to add on and learn how to implement that was the easiest part.
Yeah, no. Again, it's just super interesting to hear that from your point of view, because I think for years, like my own perspective on it, going back, sort of 10, 12, 15 years, whatever it may be, is that you're right. Generally speaking, IT pro are there as a cost center to any business, and certainly I think I've seen that change. Certainly over the last, I'm going to say, 7 or 8 years at least now, where a lot small businesses are starting to realize actually a lot of the time the technical and IT staff within any business know a lot more than sometimes the people working in other departments. It's the general thing, because IT are gone. Those people are approached, as you so eloquently put it, to fix a toilet. My phrase is anything with a plug on it. And I think what people across businesses need to understand is that when those kinds of people are constantly asked to fix things and repair things, you soon get to know quite a lot about that business that you're working for. So I guess, it's really about investing in your IT team, I suppose, to start with, to help them work with the business folk, like you say, to understand what the actual business problems are. And I guess that was always kind of the mantra. Yeah, I mean, we had this little feeling that, okay, cloud and automation is going to take over people's jobs and we're going to lose our jobs. And it's not like that at all. Yeah, I mean, what's your view on that, Anthony, in terms of using these services? Are our jobs at risk?
No, definitely not. If anything, we're busier than ever, right? From an IT pro perspective. What's interesting is the understanding of technology and what's around us and what's available in terms of services has increased rapidly, especially since the pandemic, and a lot more people are using technology to keep connected and to automate things that they can't traditionally go out and do because, of all the things that are going on. And it's interesting because the perceptions around technology, the barriers around technology have really lifted, and the business users are really, inspired and educated in terms of what technology services are out there. Sometimes, it's for the worse, right? Because you have scenarios where, you've probably heard of the multitude of manufacturers that are making these light bulbs that via your phone, you can make it change different colors, you can turn it on and off and what have you. And, you're taking a device, you're connecting it to a network, you're providing a pathway to that device via the public internet to your private network inside your home to gain access to that light bulb, to turn the light bulb on and off, or to make it turn colors. What is the security risk behind that, right? What is the aspect of, now that I have access to your light bulb, what can I affect inside of your home? I'm inside of your Wi-Fi, I can get access to your files. It's something where we see this innovation, and from a business user, they see it as, oh, this is cool, I'm going to put it in my house, I can turn all the lights on and off, I can do a disco in my house, this is awesome. But they don't think about the security considerations and the possible hacks that occur. You probably heard of the story of the casino that put in the temperature regulators into the fish tanks. They have these massive fish tanks throughout the casinos, and this company that manages the fish tanks came in, put these thermal regulators inside of the fish tanks, and connected them via Cat5 into the RJ45 jack in the wall to monitor them remotely. Bypassed security on the IT level, literally went through a hop on port 80 for outside access to gain access without security to these fish tanks, right? Hacker discovered the open port, hacker discovered the thermostats, and didn't do anything to the thermostats, but then started sniffing around the network to see, hey, what else is out there, right? And gain access to the high roller list, took down all of the electronic slot machines. The casino lost millions of dollars. And it's something where, it all stemmed from, hey, we're going to automate this temperature regulation for the fish tanks. And it affected so much more, right? The conversation piece that we talk about in terms of the importance of IT Pro, it's not just for IT Pro to say, hey, I'm here, I want to help innovate. It's also for the IT Pro to understand what the business is trying to do. In that scenario there, you had the business decision maker who agreed to the individuals that are maintaining the fish tanks to say, yeah, add them on, should be no issue, connected to our network, not a problem. Didn't involve IT, didn't involve the rest of the organization. And all those, millions of dollars lost was because of that decision. Now, when something like that occurs, who is the first, person or organization that's blamed when there's a hack,
Yeah, absolutely. IT,
right? IT.
always. Yeah.
And in this scenario here, IT wasn't even involved in the conversation. So they scratch their head and say, I don't know what happened. I don't know why this isn't here. I didn't authorize this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why it's so important to be involved and to have that conversation and not just be the team or the group that reacts, right? It's the importance of being part of that conversation. And like you said, it's been evolving over the last 5, 6, 7 years in terms of that conversation. But all the knowledge that IT pros have in terms of architecture, in terms of security, in terms of identity management, data management, backups, resiliency, governance, all that transposes into the cloud. And it's something where your on premises knowledge is very much, if not more valid in the cloud. And that's why we're so busy, because the cloud enables a whole bunch of things, right?
Yeah.
IoT devices, mobile devices gaining access, people working from their homes, especially during the pandemic. All, IT had 6 months to get everything up and running for the pandemic, so that everybody could still continuously be productive at home. And that 6 months is not even, it was a grace period, because
Yeah. Yeah.
people were going to their offices and grabbing their work desk machines and bringing them home and connecting them to their internet or connecting them to their home router. And IT was like, well, I didn't authorize this, and what do you mean I got to give them access? Like,
Yeah.
it was crazy, right? And so this is the thing where that whole aspect of cloud services, if anything, has made IT pros that much busier, because of the need of access of information that matters most to the end user, to do their day-to-day activities, to fulfill what they need to fulfill for the organization that they support, and they have to do it securely. And if a hack occurs, it's the IT pros' career is on the line. It's more responsibility, and a lot busier for IT pros today. So much so that the whole aspect of an IT pro is not just an IT pro. It's you have a backup specialist, you have a mobile specialist, you have a security specialist, and there's so many facets of IT pro that's been broken up in terms of responsibilities. And then from the student perspective, they don't even look at that. They look at it, in terms of all the resources that are out there and how do all the pieces come together. And they're great at just have a conversation with whomever I need to have a conversation with to get this done and to have this partnership, as opposed to, this is mine. Nobody steps into this domain. This is controlled by me, right? It's definitely a scenario where, from an IT pro perspective, a lot busier than it was before, a lot more responsibility than it was before, but a lot more involvement in the progression of the organization they support than they had before.
Oh, no, 100% agree. I think just listening to some of those anecdotes and the way that you were framing some of those things, then it's a case of, you're right. It's just communication. It's about not stifling that innovation, that pace, that speed of innovation, because we all know we do, like you said, the democratization and access and the breaking down of so many different barriers to actually almost jump in feet first and start creating some of these ridiculously brilliant solutions is there at the ends of most of our fingertips, whether you work in IT or not. And I think the realization now is that businesses need to understand that you kind of want to embrace that agility and that speed of innovation, but of course you've got to do it in that kind of that controlled way, so that you aren't skipping over the key things that solutions need, such as security and all the other stuff, like you say. So yeah, I mean, that's a cool way of looking at it, I suppose, in terms of, where does the traditional IT pro go now? Do they stay focused as an IT pro? Which, look, there's, I know you said at the beginning of this episode, I think there's a lot of debate going on at the moment. You certainly see a lot of it where, are we all turning into developers now, or are we all expected to become developers? I don't know. And my feeling is it doesn't hurt if you can go down that road. It'll certainly add more strings to your bow. And I guess the jury's out yet, because, there's probably still enough work in that traditional sense to keep everybody busy, like we say. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Anthony, just before we shift on to another one of the cool areas you've been looking at.
So it's funny. My good friend of mine, Pierre Roman, and I have this conversation very often, right? Pierre jokes, "Hey, I should learn Node.js to ensure that I have a career going forward, right?" And I turn to him and say, "Do you code in Python? Do you code in PowerShell? Oh, you do. So you're already a developer." Oh, it's a discussion back and forth. And do you create ARM templates, Pierre? Yes, I do. You're a developer, right? Like it's like it's funny because no, you don't have to be a traditional developer and spin up your Visual Studio to build out code, and you can do that through multitude of facets in terms of that enablement. The whole thing is, from an individual, what are you passionate about, right? You and I talked prior to the show. You're very intrigued by IoT. You're very excited by what that brings forth. You're like me, trained, seasoned IT pro, and now dabbling into this, right? Because it's a passion of yours, and you see the opportunities that you see with IoT in terms of what it can enable, in terms of data capture, and it can enable in automation. It's because you're following your passion to do so, right? A lot of individuals in IT have a passion for data management, have a passion for security, whatever their strengths are, that's their passion. That holds true even more so today in terms of how important data is and how data has become the new currency. You hear of phishing attacks and hospitals being locked out of their own data. All this is all important. All this is somebody's passion that they need to address. Do people need to learn languages or coding languages to help support and become a developer? I don't think, like I said, the delineation between developer and IT pro, it doesn't matter as much as it did back then, right? So I don't think that people have to go out and learn code, right? You probably, if you've dabbled in PowerShell, you already know about coding structure. You already know the assignment of variables, creation of arrays, assigning of data sites. You probably have that understanding already. It's more so, what is the opportunity that you have in front of you, and what resources do you need to pull in, right? Like I said, the students don't see it as, I need to be a developer or an IT pro. That team that won Hack the North, all four of them saw themselves as business students. They did not see themselves as a developer, and they saw the resources and tools that were available to them to build out that solution. So I think it's more so in terms of, what are your passions and where they lie, and how do you enable the organization that you support through your passion and through that enablement and through what you understand. So I don't think you have to, fix on a specific programming language. If you're interested, a lot of IT pros are looking at Python because of the enablements that it has from an automation standpoint, not just from IoT, but even functionality in incorporating services into architecture via Python, right? All this type of enablement, made available. It's up to the IT pro in terms of what they want to do next, and vice versa on the developer side. A lot of developers are incorporating identity management in terms of their applications, which is traditionally an IT pro function. So does that mean that developers need to know IT pro functions? If it's of their passion and it's an opportunity they need to address, 100%, right? But it's, again, up to the end user, the person that's enabling the solution or addressing this opportunity in terms of the path that they need to take. They're the only ones that would know what to do next.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you. And it's, again, I think, it's just cool to see how this is all going to kind of morph out over time, because, certainly when it comes to, I guess you can start to see it now with the way Microsoft is starting to break down their certifications to a more and more granular level, almost getting back to this it's roles-based, accreditations, but, do we need to know a bit about this, a bit about that? I suppose the jury's out to a certain extent, and it's up to the individual to find their niche is where we're going. And it's certainly what I'm feeling personally at the moment, is that, if you want to make that impact, I like the way you framed it, be a technologist and don't look at it as though you're doing one job or another. Yes, you're going to find you're probably going to be dabbling in maybe a lot more areas than you thought you might be dabbling in, but if you don't have the passion, then you won't do it, I guess. And so I guess back to that original point we made earlier, what kind of person? I'm sensing somebody that's got a little bit of passion is probably not a bad person to have in that kind of team, looking to develop some of these innovative solutions. That's probably a good trait to have somebody with a good positive attitude towards trying to find new things and new ways of working. So, I mean, look, Anthony, we've been going well here. This is a super fun chat. I mean, I want to touch on one of the other areas. I mean, going back to the points around, you're helping students now, or getting a sense for how students are, interacting with technology and how they're working with this, certainly from an AI, an IoT, machine learning perspective. And, you know, over the years, we've seen the Microsoft adverts, you know, across the TVs, you know, with the leopards, spotting leopards using cognitive services and things like that. And it looks very futuristic. And of course, it is futuristic. The one thing that gets me every time is that a lot of the time, some of these technologies have been put out there, and to a lot of people, it'll be, you know, object detection or machine learning. Oh, that's far too difficult for me to understand. And I always think it's not. It really isn't. You know, I mean, what's your take? I mean, and certainly from the perspective of one of the other subjects we were going to talk around. So, you know, one of the humanitarian aids, you know, I know that you were involved with you know, search and rescue attempts and using drones and things like that. I mean, what's your view using cognitive services and things like that, Anthony? Have you got some anecdotes around that?
Imagination is your only limitation, right? So in terms of, if you can think of it, if you can dream it, you can build it, right? And it's really something that I really harp on, in terms of, you know, the barriers that we see in technology and the limitations that we see in technology is only because it hasn't been dreamed or built yet, right? You touched on the drone piece. We work with an organization, Indro, based out of Victoria, BC, out in Western Canada, where they had an opportunity to enable drones in search and rescue for ships that are in distress out in sea. This was commissioned by the Canadian Coast Guard for this type of enablement. Initially, when they come to us, they actually wanted to put together a hack that's to see how we can better provide communication from the drone back to the central office in terms of the data that's being captured. So the problem that they were facing was, these drones are these big industrial drones. These are not the ones that you buy at the retailer. You fly these out 3 hours out at sea, gas-powered drones. They would survey the area via camera, film everything, fly back to the central office on the mainland, and then an officer would have to sit there and watch all the video to survey what the situation is, and then put together what resources are required. So initially, when they come to us, they said, we would love to have a live stream coming from this feed directly to our central office so it can be watched real time. The challenge with that at the time was, for that feed, it had to be at 720p at its very minimum, based on the requirements for search and rescue. And you're 3 hours out at sea, so cellular connectivity is not going to happen. You have to do it through satellite. And at satellite at 720p, it was thousands of dollars for the time period it's required to capture that video to transmit that video over. Now, when you're doing search and rescue and you're saving lives, you know, cost is something that shouldn't be the first and foremost, right? And that's always held true in terms of best efforts to help save people. But there's also a need to have more resources, and so that's why, in terms of budgetary, to have not just one drone surveying area, have a couple drone surveying area, and have that understanding. So we went back and we did what we call envisioning, and envisioning is important because it really drills down to the root of the opportunity or problem that you're trying to address. And I recommend doing an envisioning exercise every time you're trying to address an opportunity. That means, from the perspective of what was presented to us in terms of communication coming from the drone on the area that it was surveying, what does that mean? What is of importance? So what we did was, we said, okay, so human life is the most important thing over anything else that happens in a situation when a ship is in distress. So how do we capture just human life in a scenario where there's a problem? And when we do it this way, you then build on top of that. So like the mousetrap, we built the mousetrap so that, hey, we know that we've caught a mouse. Now we're going to add a sensor to find out temperature and light and dark and where to place these mousetraps, and add to the services and build on top of that. So in the same scenario of the drone piece, we said, okay, we want to know, in terms of, you know, life that's in the water that could be at risk when a ship is in distress. That's what we started with as a pinpoint for this project specifically. And we knew that it was cost prohibitive to send video data in respect to these individuals that are in the water. But at that time, you know, it was still in private preview. It wasn't even generally available yet, was custom vision. And custom vision was, you know, it is what it is now, where you're using vision using a camera hooked up to a CPU to understand what it's looking at, right? And to teach it. This is you know, you've probably seen the Scott Hanselman presentation, the differences between an apple and banana, right? All done through cognitive services. Actually, Paul DiCarlo has an awesome demo that you know, the amount of cars that are traveling through a specific area and doing predictions in terms of when traffic will occur in those specific areas. So definitely check that out if you look at Paul DiCarlo. So we're talking 5 years ago. Custom Vision was still in private preview. We were working directly with the engineering team to say, we want to be able to identify life jackets in the water. And they said, okay, so you're going to have a stationary camera pointed. No. We're going to fly a drone, and we're going to hit duct tape to the drone as a proof of concept, because they didn't have it built in at the time. The camera and the Raspberry Pi to identify these objects in the water. And the team went, what? Right? It literally was that. It was duct tape around a neck on a drone.
Yeah.
Flew it out in sea. We didn't do it on a live rescue. We did it on kayaks. So we had individuals in kayaks that would jump out of the kayak, and it was staged. And we were teaching the drone to identify the life jackets in the water. So at first, gentlemen would go out in the kayak, throw out a couple throw out a couple life preservers, and the drone would identify them. And then, and we had different people doing that. And then we had people wearing the life jackets. So a woman wearing a life jacket, a man wearing a life jacket, a child wearing a life jacket, identifying. And it was accuracy was good. It was high 70s in terms of the accuracy. And then we took it a step further. We said, okay, so how about we do the detection between a life jacket in the water and a body mass inside of a life jacket in the water? So we did that test now using an added infrared camera to measure, hey, this is the body mass that's inside of that life jacket. So it's not just a life jacket in the water, so it's a false positive. We wanted to actually detect there is somebody in the water. What can we build on to the next now? Now we're going to build on, let's capture the environmentals. So we'll know, the temperature outside, the amount of wind that's going, is there precipitation, is it rain, is it snow, and do a rough calculation in terms of this body mass that's inside of this life jacket with these environmentals. How long until hypothermia sets in?
Yeah.
And you're building and you're building and you're building. And we got to a point where we had to stop because we only had 4 days to build out the solution. So we stopped after the 4 days. And what was interesting was where we started from was we wanted a better communication back from the drone. And what it became was providing awareness and self-intelligence to the drone to identify individuals in the water, different sizes of individuals, different people, and to understand what's the situation, how dire it is. And so if it's of a dire situation, then you know what? You need that satellite connection to say, hey, we have an emergency here. You need to send somebody out, right? And so at that point, the message was a lot less than having that video stream, because it was more poignant in terms of, it was in essence my first foray into edge computing, where you're providing intelligence on the edge to understand what the machinery is looking at, in this case the drone, to understand this is what's of importance and what we need to address immediately, right? They're still evolving the solution, and that's the thing I love about these proof of concepts. They start out as this. Now they're doing search and rescue on land with these solutions, and they're using vans as their central office now, as opposed to the stationary office that would have been in a specified location. And they're able to help out in search and rescue of individuals lost in the forest, and more than just what it was originally built out for, based on the testing and functionality. So Indro's growing this solution. I know they're up in Ottawa right now too, so they've come to East Coast Canada to implement these types of solutions. And that's about it, right? It's about, you understand the opportunity, you understand the problem, and you build the technology to address that. And then it grows in terms of, okay, well, if we can do this, then we can do this. And we provided the findings back to the engineering team. They were like, this is amazing. And you probably saw the demo with regards to using the drones to identify for HVAC units where holes exist. That stemmed off the work that happened with the life jacket scenario, right? And it's continuously growing. So that's what I mean by your imagination is your only limitation. If you can think of it, if you understand the opportunity and the problem, you will make the technology work. It may not be ratified yet in terms of a solution, it may not be built yet, but you're more inclined to finish off and address this opportunity using the technology, as opposed to, imagine if we just started with, okay, we're going to use camera technology for this functionality, right? And how do we connect the stream back? And that's all we would be fixated on, and we would never have this solution that's not only address that opportunity, but address a plethora of other opportunities, and is continuously evolving and growing.
I was going to say though, Anthony, as you were describing that there, it's like, just to pick out that point that you made there, if people didn't spot it, was around, IoT Edge at the end of the day solved an issue which was fundamentally a cost issue, but a non-scalable cost issue. Why would you want, however many drones all streaming their video links to a satellite at that high cost? So instead, you're keeping all of that analysis of that video footage with the drone. And only at a point that the drone recognizes that there is an actual emergency, yes, switch the camera feed on by all means. But that's such a powerful and innovative way of looking at it. Okay, satellite uplink costs may come down in price, and that may not be an issue in years to come. But I think for people listening to this, these are the kinds of things that, again, it's back to using the creativity and your imagination, isn't it? I completely agree, is that, just a kind of a little bit of lateral thought and out of the box, to not spout off too many cliches, but it's just having those imaginative ways of using technology in the ways that you might not immediately spring to mind. But I mean, it's fantastic. It really is. And I always love hearing these stories where, things like AI and IoT come into play. And you've just illustrated, perfectly why I've got a passion in that, because it doesn't need to be groundbreaking. The idea doesn't need to be grandiose. It can be something relatively simple and straightforward, but it can be so powerful, can't it, when you start to use these technologies in that way and, like you say, build on them over time. Anthony, honestly, I could go on and keep listening to your stories on IoT for another few hours here, but we're hitting the 50-minute mark now. So not that I want to wrap this conversation up. It's been super fun. I've really enjoyed it so far. So, I mean, but I suppose all good things come to an end. I'll leave you with one last question, Anthony. And that is, why are we doing all this? Why are we learning all this cool new stuff? Where are we going? And big open-ended question of what are your next big bets in technology over the next 5 years?
The way that we're moving forward in terms of data acquisition and data utilization and incorporation of artificial intelligence for automation, for understanding the world around us, we're looking at more and more immersive technologies, right? I'm seeing, bus companies that are doing understanding of how light shines in through a city affects a bus driver's eyes in terms of the patterns that they drive inside of the city, and how much of a slowdown there is for that bus driver to get to their destination because of that light, and how to realign the positioning of those buses so that they don't get hit with that light, and so there's no degradation of service, right? I think from a perspective of technology and where we're going, the whole aspect of the virtualized plane is something where we're seeing more and more often in terms of utilization. If we're talking specifically from IoT, you probably heard the term digital twin, where you're ingesting real world data coming in from actually deployed IoT devices into a virtualized world, so that it can do testing. If I change this variable, if I move this IoT sensor, if I incorporate an additional sensor, what does that mean for that data that I have, and what is the desired outcome that's reported to in a virtualized space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot more of that virtualized learning occurring, very much like what we had when we went Hyper-V and the virtualization. So we went from bare bones to virtualization.
Sure.
On servers for that type of implementation. We're starting to see that immersiveness for the data, of learning from what the data is actually going to do, and what we're trying to accomplish it with it. From a day-to-day activity, that same immersion of data from an end user perspective. You're probably familiar with HoloLens and mixed reality and what have you. A little bit, in terms of the higher end of cost, and that obviously has to come down in terms of massive adoption. And we're starting to see that. Like Ray-Ban just did that partnership with Facebook in terms of their type of augmented reality. I know I've heard of vehicles that have the in windshield display and have that, your mapping software then turn left, turn right, as required inside of the windshield, as opposed to having it on the dash, right? It's something where we're going to start to see more of that immersion into the data in the real world experiences, for solutions that, or opportunities that we haven't even thought of yet, right? The smartphone, we're in this saturation right now where, okay, so we increase the speed, we increase the cameras. Now you're able to fold the phones, and you have all those things. Takes me back to the days of the Motorola Razr, and oh my god, I can fold my phone and put it in my pocket. It only lasts an hour, and I can make 30 phone calls on it, but that's it. But it's something where, the way we communicate, the way we interact with people, how we interchange and experience things with data and what have you. You hear about theme parks that are including VR glasses on their roller coasters. On their older roller coasters to immerse you in a new world. You're going to see a lot more of that. And It's available today from your smartphone. It's not the best experience, and a lot of the smartphones have that VR type of capability. In some cases, even a mixed reality or augmented reality capability, where you're seeing the real world and you're seeing the imagery inside of that real world, how you interact with it. It's going to come, and it's going to come pretty rapidly in terms of this whole experience of immersing yourself in the data, immersing yourself in the experience, the whole spatial technology and understanding the world around you and how the data interacts with that world is rapidly coming. I see that as the next way that we digest and consume and create data going forward.
Yeah, I like that. I really do like that answer. I suppose that kind of, like you said, data is the new gold, and I guess what we're going to see more and more companies releasing APIs and selling APIs or selling access to a whole plethora of different data types and data sources across everything we can probably imagine. I guess is probably where we're going to go. And like you say, just that ingesting and usage of that data and those services into everyday products potentially, or new products. So I like it. I do like where you're going with that one. It's going to be a super interesting next sort of 5 to 10 years, I think. And I think I agree, we're going to be rushed off our feet trying to keep up with it, no doubt. But Anthony, this has been such a fantastic chat. Honestly, thank you so much for giving up your time and taking me through that. As always, I could sit and listen to people speak about IoT and AI forever. I find it all very inspirational, and I guess I'm hoping people that watch this video do as well, because I think it's certainly a place we're going to be playing in a lot more over the coming years. But until next time, Anthony, thanks for being such an awesome guest.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's been awesome.
No, I will speak to you soon. Thanks a lot, Anthony. Take care.